I'll let the courts fight that out, and our goal is to make sure that every single vote is counted.
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching special election coverage on NBC News Now. Another night of special election coverage. Here's where we are. The 2020 presidential race still too close to call in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Those states counting votes as we speak. Right now, both candidates still have a path to victory. Joe Biden leading with 253 electoral votes to President Trump's 214. But the former VP still 17 votes away from the 270 he would need to win the White House. The Biden campaign tweeting earlier today, quote, "Be patient, folks. Votes are being counted, and we feel good about where we are." Meanwhile, we haven't seen President Trump since election night, but the Trump campaign is unleashing its legal team, filing lawsuits over ballot counting in Nevada and Pennsylvania. 26 total electoral votes are up for grabs between those two states. In Michigan and Georgia, judges have denied Trump campaign lawsuits over absentee ballots. We've got reporters in all of the battleground states that will eventually decide this election. All right, let's dig into the numbers in those states that are still too close to call tonight. To do that, we have NBC News political editor Carrie Dan. Carrie, thanks so much for joining us for another night. Where do you want to go first? We will let you take the lead here.
So let's start in Pennsylvania. We just heard from the Secretary of State there. She said they're still counting. Just to be patient, she said, stay tuned. We're looking probably to get more results from there, and it's really, really getting very close. We've seen the trend line. You always want to be a candidate in a case like this where the trend is going your way, and Pennsylvania is by far the state where that's happening the most for Joe Biden. This time yesterday, Donald Trump was leading by about 5.5%. That's down to just about 1.5%. And Joe Biden keeps chipping away at that lead. Now, a lot of that is because there's a lot of vote that's still coming in from Philadelphia. Those are ballots that are coming from a very Democratic area. Philadelphia is breaking overall for Joe Biden by about an 80% margin. Those mail ballots are coming in at about a 90% margin for Joe Biden. And that's why that's why his lead is growing, or his margin is growing there. Now, I also want to point out that Biden is also doing well in other parts of the state. Philadelphia is not the only place in Pennsylvania that still has vote out, and it's not the only place that his votes are coming from. He's also improving on Hillary Clinton's margins throughout the state in counties that don't look like a big urban center, places that are more white and working class. He's not winning those places necessarily, but he's improving on Hillary Clinton's margin. Keep in mind, this is a state that Donald Trump only won by 45,000 votes. Biden is not only doing what he needs to do in the urban areas, he's also chipping away at that lead by eating in just by a couple percentage points throughout the state, improving on Hillary Clinton's numbers back in 2016. Let's move to Nevada. There's about 200,000
Hey, Carrie, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because we are going to head back to Pennsylvania to the Secretary of State with the latest on the vote count there. Thanks so much, Carrie.
Is there a way that you can do that?
Well, it's fixed. I mean, it's fixed on the website. And you can also, I think I've said this priors of these, but you can always go to the county websites. You can look and see, it's an easy way to double check. Yes, Dennis.
Secretary, some tweets have surfaced, admittedly from a couple of years ago, your tweets suggesting negative things about Donald Trump. What do you say to people that say, geez, you're the person overseeing this election and you have clearly partisan views on the matter? Well, what's your response to that?
So my response is, look, these were 4 years ago. And at the time, I was not in the administration. I was not in any public service. I was a private citizen. It was a personal Twitter account. So that, and then when I became Secretary of State, I took an oath, Dennis, and I took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Constitution of the United States. And partisan politics have no place in the Pennsylvania Department of State or any county elections office for that matter. I mean, we work for voting rights and for effective election administration. And I can tell you that I will do everything in my power to make sure that every voter, every candidate, and every party have access to a fair, free, safe, and secure election. And I don't care what their background is, and I don't care what my background is. That's what we do at the Department of State. Thank you.
Will President Trump be packing up the Oval Office so Joe Biden can move in, or will the Trump family photos stay right where they are? We are all wondering, and the campaigns are too. NBC News correspondent Mike Memoli is in Wilmington, Delaware with the Biden campaign. NBC News political reporter Monica Alba joining me with the latest from the Trump campaign. Mike, I'll start with you. What's the mood like at Biden campaign headquarters right now?
A lot of wait and see from Team Biden at this point. You know, yesterday around this time, we were getting those big calls in Michigan and Wisconsin. That put Joe Biden within a state or a combination of states from 270 electoral votes. In the time since then, all we've done is get more votes, but no projections. And the Biden team, though, looking at all the data that's coming in, saying they still believe he will be the president of the United States at the end of the day. And so what have we seen from Joe Biden today? He is going about the business of somebody who looks like he's ready to become the president of the United States. He had a briefing along with Senator Kamala Harris about both the coronavirus pandemic and the economic fallout from it. He came out afterwards and delivered some brief remarks talking about the state of play in the election as well. Let's take a listen.
Democracy is sometimes messy. It sometimes requires a little patience as well. But that patience has been rewarded now for more than 240 years with a system of governance that's been the envy of the world. And we continue to feel, Senator and I, we continue to feel very good about where things stand. We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon.
So what leads Biden to say he's confident? If you look at the results state by state, as the Biden campaign laid it out earlier today, Nevada, they feel good. They've been ahead and continue to expect to be so. Arizona, they say it's going to require some patience, but the votes still continue to come in there. And of course, he still has the lead. And then when we get to Pennsylvania, of course, the biggest prize really still out there. The numbers only continue to trend in his direction. The number of votes in the Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs, which appear to be very squarely in the Biden column, are coming. And so as one Biden campaign official put it, at the end of the day, and we hope it's today, that we believe he's going to be the next president of the United States.
Monica, we haven't heard from the president or seen the president, I should say, in person, but he has certainly fired off a bunch of tweets, one saying to stop the vote count, another saying stop the fraud. Have election or government officials flagged any actual cases of fraud here?
No, not that we've seen, Allison. This is something that the president and his closest allies and surrogates have continued to scream from the top of their lungs, despite any evidence of widespread voter fraud. But they have descended into certain states and said they're going to launch lawsuits because they believe there could be some fraud without providing any evidence for that, particularly in Nevada. That's something we saw earlier today. You mentioned we haven't seen the president on camera today. It's the second straight day of that, but the White House has not declared a travel photo lid yet formally, so it's still possible we could hear from him or see him in person in the next couple of hours. But it is worth noting that it has been nearly 40 hours since he made those remarks overnight after election night returns had started to come in, and he declared that early victory. That, of course, wasn't the case before we even had now what we have, which is a more close to complete picture, not a complete picture yet. But it has been notable that he has been tweeting, and all of those misleading messages have been flagged by Twitter and social media companies saying, essentially, don't listen to this because the president is trying to make these accusations that the Democrats or others are trying to steal the election. But that's why you see the Trump campaign pivoting to this legal strategy, since it seems their path to 270 electoral votes just becomes far, far, far more narrow, something we've been talking about for 24 hours now. They really need to see everything that is still outstanding go in their direction. And at this point, with the former Vice President Biden's vote count still coming in those key states like Georgia and Pennsylvania, that's becoming a harder reality to come to terms with, it seems, here at the White House.
Mike, we have already seen the Trump campaign's lawsuits thrown out in Michigan and Georgia. How is the Biden campaign preparing, though, to deal with any lawsuits that might stick in other states?
Well, there's both the legal fight and the public relations fight. On the latter part, we heard from Andrew Bates, a campaign spokesperson, saying simply that this is not the behavior of a winning campaign, trying to argue that the fact that they're trying to get lawyers involved rather than voters involved shows what they think is the track that this election is heading on. We also heard from Bob Bauer, who's one of the top lawyers on the Biden team, who just continued to make a point he made yesterday, which is that all of these suits that they're filing are baseless, and it's a strategy, as he put it, that's doomed to failure. But that being said, of course, they're ready, if they need to really engage in this process. They say they have lawyers ready to be in these states where they need to be to respond to the Trump challenges. They have paperwork ready to go. And we also see a number of outside lawyers, not even affiliated with the campaign, but experienced in the election law, who have worked on behalf of the Democratic Party, who are also prepared to engage as well, Allison.
Monica, here's former counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, on Fox News today. Check this out.
And why are we in such a rush to finish this election prematurely? Let's be patient. Let's take a deep breath. Let's count every legal vote. I think it's a time to be methodical and not emotional.
Right.
Monica, we haven't heard all that much of that from the Trump campaign. What are you hearing from your sources at the White House, in the campaign? Does anyone agree with this? Let's be patient. Let's see. It seems like they are rushing to litigate.
Exactly, Allison. It starts with the president, right? With the candidate himself, who tweeted earlier today, "Stop the count," confusing even aides in his own reelect effort about what that meant. Because, of course, if that were to happen, that would mean that Joe Biden's lead in particular battlegrounds would mean he has won and not the president, which is what they claim. They're still waiting to get a full picture in a state like Arizona, for example, or Nevada, or even Pennsylvania or Georgia. So then the campaign tried to do a little bit of cleanup, and instead they issued their own statement that was coming from the president that was essentially a tweet, but they released it instead through their email distribution list, also in an attempt, it seems, to get around what Twitter had been doing, which was flagging misleading information. But then they tried to claim that really they wanted to pivot the message to stopping, in their words, the fraud. That's where you see them focusing now. But as Mike Memoli will tell you, a campaign that is so focused on the legal battles and what might be going wrong is not one that feels particularly positioned or optimistic about winning the race, right? This is a completely defensive and defiant campaign and reelect effort that's really just trying to squeeze out whatever might be possible in terms of delaying the next few days, and perhaps trying to create and sow some discord and confusion among people who may not be sure of what's happening here. It's not a particularly confident campaign in these closing hours, and it's notable that the president himself hasn't been the one to deliver that message in person. Really, it's been his surrogates, it's been his sons. Will he be the one to do that later today or tomorrow? We'll have to see.
Monica, one last question for you. NBC's Courtney Kube, Carol Lee reporting that Defense Secretary Mark Esper has prepared his resignation letter. What can you tell us?
Yeah, great exclusive reporting there from my colleagues who have been tracking this for a couple of months. We know that Secretary Esper and the president have not gotten along at all times, and this is something that could be natural when you move on from one incumbent president to a new president-elect. We would see potentially a ton of turnover, even if the president were to win re-election. But this is something we're learning, that he has drafted that letter of resignation. He obviously hasn't submitted it yet, but he's ready to do that should the president perhaps lose. It's also worth noting they've had multiple disagreements, both play out in public and in private. And the president has, of course, gone through several different secretaries of defense, and he has spoken publicly about his disagreements with him. I would expect that would not be the only cabinet secretary we may see a change for if the president were to lose in the next week or so, Allison.
All right, Mike and Monica, I think we've been doing this for 3 nights now, but I'm not entirely sure, not confident in that one. But I have a feeling I'll be seeing you guys again, not only tonight, but maybe even tomorrow. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. The presidential race in Georgia is still too close to call. Election officials there briefing the public on how they'll make sure all the state's votes are counted.
The effort here is to make sure that everybody's vote, legal vote, is counted properly, and that the actual results are reflective of the voters' intent. The issue we have in Georgia is, like I just said, it's a close vote. There's other states that have more votes to count than we do, but it's a wide margin, so nobody cares. So this is the first time we've used paper ballots in this state in 20 years.
Vote it is. Donald Trump holding a 0.2% lead in the state. As you can see, that's just about 9,500 votes. NBC News reporter Priscilla Thompson joining us now from Atlanta, Georgia. Priscilla, what should we know about the count right now in Georgia? What's the very latest?
Well, Allison, what we do know is that this race is getting tighter and tighter as those results continue to be tallied. Right now, you mentioned the difference right now between Donald Trump and former Vice President Biden of about 9,500 votes. There are 42,000 more votes to be counted here, more absentee ballots to be counted here, and that could have a pretty big impact when we're talking about those very thin margins. And the state officials have briefed reporters twice today, and what we're hearing is a shift to really focus less on a timeline and more on this idea of making sure that these votes are being counted accurately and fairly, and that we are getting an accurate picture of what's going on here. Now, as the timeline goes, we were initially told that we would have results by the end of the day yesterday. We're now being told we should have results by the end of the day today. But as I mentioned, there are still 42,000 absentee ballots that need to be counted in the state, 17,000 of those in Chatham County alone, down by Savannah, Georgia. And so it is very possible that we're going to have to wait a little while before we have a really clear picture. But that is really important just because of how close this race is turning out to be here. Allison.
Priscilla, Gabe Sterling, the Georgia Voting System Implementation Manager, that is some title, describing some technical issues that some counties in Georgia are having. What's happening there?
Right. So there were a couple of different technical issues that some counties encountered. In Gwinnett County, there was an issue with some of the ballots not being able to be read when they were scanned. And so we saw an election board coming in beginning today and going through those ballots to make sure that the voters' intentions were accurately counted when those ballots were tabulated. Another issue that we saw in Taylor County is that the ballots were too large. They weren't the right size, and so they weren't able to be scanned. And so folks there are going back and duplicating ballots in order to get those scanned. They have around 450 of those to go in that area. But overwhelmingly, the time that it's taking to count these ballots hasn't necessarily been a result of technical difficulties. It's really just been because of the sheer amount of absentee ballots that needed to be counted. Yesterday morning, there were 250,000 ballots across the state that needed to be counted. Today, at this point in time, we're down to around 42,000. So they've made a pretty significant dent here, but still have a ways to go. Allison?
All right, Priscilla, let's talk about lawsuits, because that appears to be the word of the day. A judge dismissing a Trump campaign lawsuit in Georgia earlier today. Tell us about that.
Exactly. That ruling came down earlier around midday today. And essentially, this lawsuit was filed earlier this week, and it stems from two Republican poll observers who said that they saw an election official who was collecting absentee ballots appear to mix some absentee ballots that were turned in on time with absentee ballots that were turned in late. Here in Georgia, you had to have those ballots in by 7 p.m. on Tuesday when polls closed. If you didn't have them in by that time, they were not going to be counted. So the Georgia GOP party, along with the Trump campaign, filed suit. A judge heard that case today and determined that they did not have legal standing and ended up dismissing that case, saying that there just wasn't enough evidence there. But we do know that in the next 10 minutes, the Trump campaign is going to be holding a press conference here in Atlanta. There are going to be a number of Trump surrogates there, and so we'll be monitoring that to see if we should anticipate any further legal action or what they're going to be saying tonight. Allison.
All right, Priscilla Thompson with the latest on the race in Georgia. Thank you so much.
You bet.
President Trump demanding a recount in Wisconsin. Joe Biden, the apparent winner there by just over 20,000 votes. That's a margin of less than 1%, which allows for a recount. But former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker thinks Joe Biden's lead is too big to overcome.
With millions of votes cast, you're talking about less than 1%, about 0.7% of the vote is the difference between the two candidates. And as you just alluded to, it's about 21,000 votes. So right now, today, if nothing else changed, that is indeed a high hurdle.
NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joining me now from Milwaukee. Cal, here's what the Trump campaign is saying about their recount request. There have been reports of irregularities in several Wisconsin counties, which raise serious doubts about the validity of the results. What are election officials there saying about that claim?